Roman Reigns and Jey Uso react to Seth Rollins backstage tension before Crown Jewel 2025. This is absolutely infuriating, and if you're not furious about the disrespect and mind games happening right now, then you missed the most explosive backstage confrontation in WWE history. Roman Reigns and Jey Uso just had a heated reaction to Seth Rollins' psychological warfare before Crown Jewel 2025, and what went down behind closed doors is threatening to destroy the fragile peace in the bloodline while simultaneously reigniting the most personal rivalry in modern WWE. If you think this is just normal pre-match hype, you're dead wrong. This is Seth Rollins playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and Roman's response proves that the architect is getting deep inside the tribal chief's head. Comment right now if you think Seth Rollins is about to expose Roman Reigns' biggest weakness at Crown Jewel, because what I'm about to reveal shows that Seth has been planning this psychological assault for months and Roman is walking straight into a trap that could shatter the bloodline forever. This isn't about who's the better wrestler, this is about Seth weaponizing history, weaponizing brotherhood, and weaponizing Roman's own insecurities in ways that will leave the tribal chief broken regardless of who wins the match. Let me set the scene because the context of this backstage tension is absolutely crucial to understanding why the situation is so volatile and why Crown Jewel 2025 is shaping up to be a career-defining moment for everyone involved. Seth Rollins has been on a warpath ever since his confrontation with Roman and the Bloodline weeks ago. He's been cutting promos about how Roman has become everything the Shield used to fight against, about how the tribal chief is just a corporate champion hiding behind family. But those public promos were just the surface level of Seth's strategy. What happened backstage before this week's SmackDown was Seth executing the real planned psychological warfare designed to get into Roman's head by attacking the one thing Roman values above everything else, his control over the bloodline and specifically his relationship with Jey Uso. Here's the scene. Roman was in his private locker room with Paul Heyman, strategizing about Crown Jewel, when Jey Uso walked in looking visibly shaken. Roman immediately picked up on it. You don't run the bloodline for years without being able to read your family members' emotions. What happened, Us? Roman asked, his voice carrying that edge of concern mixed with authority that defines his leadership style. Here's a trivia question for the Shield fans. In what year did Seth Rollins betray the Shield by attacking Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose? Drop your answer below. Jey hesitated, which is significant because Jey Uso doesn't hesitate around Roman anymore. After years of being under the tribal chief's thumb, Jey has learned to speak directly and honestly with his cousin. But this hesitation showed that whatever Seth had said to him had rattled Jey in ways that even Roman's most intense moments never did. I just ran into Seth backstage, Jey finally said, and you could see Roman's entire body language change instantly. His jaw clenched. His fists tightened. Just the mention of Seth Rollins' name was enough to trigger a reaction in Roman that he rarely shows, genuine concern mixed with barely suppressed rage. What did he say? Roman demanded, standing up from his chair, his full attention now focused on Jey. Paul Heyman tried to interject with some calming words, but Roman waved him off. This was family business, and when it comes to Seth Rollins, it's always personal. Jey took a breath before answering. He asked me if I remembered what it was like when we were all brothers. When the Shield was real, before the politics, before the bloodline, before all the tribal chief stuff. He said he misses those days. He misses US. The silence that followed was deafening. Roman stared at Jey with an expression that was difficult to read. Was it anger? Was it fear? Was it something else entirely? Paul Heyman looked nervous, clearly understanding the implications of what Seth was doing. This wasn't just trash talk. This was Seth trying to remind Jey of a time before Roman's dominance, a time when they were equals, a time when brotherhood meant something different than it does now. And what did you say? Roman asked, his voice quiet but carrying a dangerous edge. This is where the tension became unbearable because Roman was essentially asking Jey, are you still loyal to me, or is Seth getting to you? Drop a comment. Do you think Jey Uso is starting to have doubts about the bloodline, or is he 100% loyal to Roman no matter what? Let me know your take. Jey's response was carefully measured. I told him that the Shield is dead, that we're bloodline now, and that he needs to focus on Crown Jewel instead of living in the past. But, Jey paused again, and that pause contained volumes of unspoken emotion. He just smiled and said the Shield might be dead, but the memories aren't. And memories can be more powerful than any faction. Those words from Seth were calculated brilliance. He wasn't trying to recruit Jey away from Roman. That would never work, and Seth knows it. What Seth was doing was planting seeds of doubt, reminding Jey that there was a time before all the drama, before the manipulation, before the tribal chief's reign of control. He was making Jey think about whether what he has now with Roman is better than what they had then as Shield brothers. Roman's reaction was explosive but in a controlled way that's somehow more terrifying than if he just started yelling. He walked over to Jey, put his hands on his cousin's shoulders, and looked him directly in the eyes. Listen to me very carefully, Seth Rollins is a manipulator. He's a liar. He's trying to get in your head because he knows he can't beat me straight up. Everything he said to you was designed to create doubt, to create division, to weaken the bloodline before Crown Jewel. Do you understand what he's doing? Jey nodded, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of something that suggested Seth's words had landed exactly where Seth wanted them to land. Roman saw it too, and you could see the calculation happening in Roman's mind. How does he address this? How does he neutralize Seth's psychological attack without making it worse? The Shield was built on a lie, Roman continued, his voice getting more intense. It was built on the idea that we were equals, that we all had equal say, equal power, equal respect. But that was never true. There was always going to be an alpha. Seth knew it, which is why he betrayed us first. He destroyed the Shield because he wanted to be the guy, but he wasn't strong enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't tribal chief enough to hold that position. Paul Heyman nodded along enthusiastically. My tribal chief speaks the truth. Seth Rollins destroyed the Shield out of jealousy of you, Roman. Jealousy of your natural leadership, your strength, your destiny. But here's where Roman made a critical mistake in his response. He kept talking, kept justifying, kept explaining, all of which suggested that Seth's psychological warfare was working. If Roman was truly unbothered by Seth's manipulation tactics, he would have dismissed it immediately and moved on. Instead, he was spending significant time and energy addressing it, which meant Seth had successfully gotten under his skin. Quick question, who was the last member to officially join the Shield during their original run? Real wrestling historians will know this. Jey tried to reassure Roman, I'm with you. I'm always with you. Seth can't break what we've built. The bloodline is family, and family is everything. But even as Jey said those words, there was something hollow about them, something rehearsed, like he was saying what Roman needed to hear rather than what he actually felt. Roman seemed to sense this too because his next move was telling. Instead of accepting Jey's reassurance and moving on, Roman double-checked, you're sure? Because if you have any doubts, any second thoughts, any part of you that's wondering if Seth has a point, I need to know now. I can't have question marks in the bloodline heading into the biggest match of my career. The fact that Roman even asked that question reveals his vulnerability. The tribal chief, the man who demands absolute loyalty and acknowledges no weakness, was essentially asking for validation from Jey. That's not strength, that's insecurity, and it's exactly what Seth wanted to create. Meanwhile, while all this was happening in Roman's locker room, cameras caught Seth Rollins in a different part of the backstage area, and he was smiling. Not a happy smile, a knowing smile. The smile of someone who just executed a perfect strategy and was watching it work in real time. Seth knew that his brief conversation with Jey would get back to Roman. He wanted it to get back to Roman. The whole point was to make Roman question the loyalty of his family, to make Roman second-guess the foundation of his power. When asked by an interviewer what he hoped to accomplish at Crown Jewel, Seth's response was chilling. Crown Jewel isn't about winning or losing a match. It's about exposing the truth. Roman Reigns has built an empire on fear, manipulation, and control. He thinks the bloodline makes him strong, but it's actually his weakness. Because when you base your entire identity on controlling other people, you live in constant fear of losing that control. And at Crown Jewel, I'm going to show Roman and show Jey, and show everyone in the bloodline what happens when that fear becomes reality. Tell me in the comments, is Seth Rollins playing mind games, or does he genuinely believe he can break up the bloodline from the inside? What's your read on his strategy? The implications of Seth's strategy are massive for Crown Jewel and beyond. This isn't just a match anymore, it's a referendum on Roman's leadership, on the bloodline's unity, on whether fear and control can truly create loyalty or if they just create compliance that crumbles when challenged. What makes this even more fascinating is the historical context between these three men. Roman, Seth, and Jey don't just have wrestling history, they have emotional history. The Shield wasn't just a faction, it was a brotherhood that felt real. When Seth destroyed it, the betrayal wasn't just storyline, it resonated as genuine heartbreak. And now Seth is using that history as a weapon against Roman. The genius of Seth's approach is that he's not attacking Roman's wrestling ability or his championship credentials. He's attacking the narrative that Roman has built his entire tribal chief persona around. Roman claims the bloodline is built on respect and family love. Seth is arguing that it's actually built on fear and manipulation. And by simply asking that question, Seth has planted doubt in everyone's minds, including potentially Jey's. From Roman's perspective, this has to be terrifying. His entire power structure depends on the bloodline being unified and unquestionable. Jimmy is gone. Solo has his own agenda. Jey is the one person Roman thought he could absolutely count on. For Seth to target that relationship specifically shows how well Seth understands Roman's vulnerabilities. The backstage reaction to this tension has been intense. Other wrestlers are watching this situation carefully because everyone understands that if the bloodline shows cracks, the entire WWE power structure shifts. Some wrestlers are rooting for Seth to succeed in creating chaos because it would open up opportunities for them. Others are loyal to Roman and view Seth's tactics as dishonorable manipulation. The women's division has been particularly vocal, with several female superstars drawing parallels to their own experiences with manipulation and psychological warfare. They're pointing out that Seth's strategy, using emotional connections as weapons, is something women in wrestling have been criticized for doing, but when Seth does it, it's called genius psychology. What's your opinion? Is Seth's psychological warfare brilliant strategy or dishonorable manipulation? Should there be limits on what kind of mental games wrestlers play? Sound off below. Paul Heyman's role in all this is fascinating because he's caught between multiple competing interests. He needs to keep Roman confident and focused for Crown Jewel. He needs to address the G situation without making it worse. And he needs to counter Seth's narrative without giving it more oxygen. It's a nearly impossible balancing act. Heyman's attempt at damage control was telling. My tribal chief, Seth Rollins, is doing what Seth Rollins has always done. He's lying, he's manipulating, he's trying to rewrite history to make himself look better. The Shield was your vehicle to greatness. You were the breakout star. You went on to main event WrestleManias. Seth, Heyman scoffed. Seth has spent his entire career trying to recapture the glory he had as your partner. But even Heyman's words rang slightly hollow because they didn't address the core of what Seth was saying. Seth wasn't claiming he was better than Roman. He was claiming that the brotherhood they once had was more real than what Roman has now with the bloodline. That's a much harder argument to counter because it's about feeling and authenticity rather than accomplishments and accolades. The social media reaction to this backstage tension has been explosive. #Roman vs Seth has been trending worldwide. Fan theories about G potentially turning on Roman at Crown Jewel have multiplied exponentially. Video packages comparing Shield-era footage to Bloodline-era footage have gone viral, with fans debating which version of these relationships was more genuine. Here's a spicy trivia question. How many times did the Shield hold tag team gold together during their original run? Show me you know your Shield history. International media coverage has been intense because Crown Jewel is obviously a huge event for WWE's Middle Eastern fanbase. The added drama of this psychological warfare between Roman and Seth has only increased interest and speculation. WWE is looking at potentially record-breaking numbers if they deliver on the tension they've built. The merchandise implications are significant. WWE has already started releasing limited edition Crown Jewel 2025 items featuring Roman vs Seth, and they're selling at unprecedented rates. The company is making massive money off this rivalry, which creates pressure to deliver a payoff that justifies all the hype and build-up. But here's the real question that everyone is asking: what happens at Crown Jewel? Does Roman win clean and reassert his dominance, proving Seth's mind games didn't work? Does Seth win and validate everything he's been saying about Roman's weakness? Or, and this is what everyone is really afraid of / hoping for, does G get involved in a way that changes everything? The potential scenarios are endless. G costs Roman the match, proving Seth was right about the bloodline's foundation being unstable. G saves Roman, but Roman questions his loyalty anyway, driving a wedge between them. G refuses to get involved at all, leaving Roman to succeed or fail on his own. Seth uses G as a psychological weapon during the match itself, constantly referencing their Shield history. Each scenario leads to completely different directions for the storyline and has massive implications for everyone involved. WWE has set up a situation where nearly any outcome can be compelling if executed properly. The veteran wrestlers' perspectives on this situation have been interesting. Many of them are praising Seth for using psychology and storytelling rather than just relying on physicality. They're calling this old-school wrestling psychology where you work your opponent's mind before you ever touch them physically. Others are criticizing Seth for potentially creating real issues between Roman and G just for storyline purposes. There's always a risk when you blur the lines between fiction and reality. What if Seth's mind games actually do create legitimate problems in the real relationship between Roman and G? Let me get your take. Should wrestlers be allowed to use real relationships and real emotions as part of their storylines, or should there be boundaries protecting personal connections? Drop your thoughts. The pressure on Roman heading into Crown Jewel is immense. He's not just defending his championship or his winning streak, he's defending his entire identity as tribal chief. If Seth is right, if the bloodline is built on fear rather than respect, if G's loyalty is questionable, then everything Roman has built for years comes crashing down. From a purely strategic standpoint, Roman has several options. Ignore Seth's mind games completely and focus solely on wrestling. Double down on controlling G to ensure his loyalty. Address Seth's points head-on and try to prove them wrong. Use Seth's own tactics against him by bringing up Seth's betrayal of the Shield. Each option has risks and rewards, and Roman's choice will reveal a lot about his state of mind and his confidence level. The comparison to legendary wrestling rivalries is inevitable. Is this Roman vs Seth at the same level as Austin vs Rock? Is it comparable to Michaels vs Brett? Does it reach the psychological intensity of CM Punk vs Jeff Hardy? Where does this rank among the greatest WWE feuds of all time? The answer probably depends on how Crown Jewel plays out and what happens afterward. Great rivalries aren't just about good matches, they're about moments and emotions and consequences that change people's careers forever. Roman vs Seth has the potential to be that kind of rivalry if WWE commits to following through on all the psychological complexity they've established. One final question before we wrap up: if you were booking Crown Jewel, how would you end the Roman vs. Seth match? Clean win for Roman? Seth victory? G interference? Give me your fantasy booking. The business implications are staggering. Crown Jewel is one of WWE's most lucrative events. The Roman vs. Seth match is the main draw. If they deliver something truly special, not just a good match but a moment that lives up to all the build, it could be one of the most profitable shows in WWE history. But if they fumble this, if the payoff doesn't justify the build-up, if the psychological complexity gets dropped for a standard wrestling match, the backlash will be severe. Fan expectations are sky-high, and meeting those expectations requires creative courage and commitment to the story. The legacy implications for all three men, Roman, Seth, and G, are massive. This feud will be part of how they're remembered. Did Roman successfully defend the bloodline against Seth's psychological assault? Did Seth prove that brotherhood matters more than authority? Did G show loyalty or independence? The answers to these questions will define their characters for years. Now I want to hear from you, the Wrestling Newsletter family, about everything. Tell me in the comments. Is Seth Rollins getting inside Roman's head, or is Roman just playing along? Will G Uso remain loyal to Roman, or will Seth's words affect him? Who do you think should win at Crown Jewel? What's the most likely shocking moment that could happen? Is this the best WWE storyline of 2025 so far? Smash that like button if you're Team Seth and think he's exposing Roman's weaknesses. Hit that like button if you're Team Roman and think the Tribal Chief will prove everyone wrong. Either way, engage with this video. Subscribe to Wrestling Newsletter because we're covering every moment of Crown Jewel 2025 and every development in this Roman vs. Seth saga. This is the biggest match of the year and we'll have all the analysis. Share this video with every wrestling fan because the psychological warfare between Roman and Seth before Crown Jewel is must-see storytelling. Everyone needs to understand what's really happening here. Roman Reigns and Jey Uso are dealing with Seth Rollins' mind games. The Tribal Chief's authority is being questioned. Crown Jewel 2025 is going to be explosive, and the fallout could change WWE forever. This is just the beginning of something legendary.